morning to all our viewers. I'm thrilled to present to you the nasscom Technology and Leadership Forum Leader in Conversation Talk Series today. Our topic of discussion today is innovation and agility in the age of Web 3.0. We have just the right leader to educate us on this theme. It gives me immense pleasure to invite our very special guest today, Jamshyd Khajotia, CIO and Head of Wholesale Technology India, HSBC. Jamshed, a very warm welcome today morning.
And a good morning to you as well, Namita. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Here's my little attempt to introduce Jamshed to all of you. Jamshed has about 3 decades of diversified technology experience across leading global organizations, including Serco, IBM, where he was service delivery lead for the GSTC, WNS, where he led the BFSI operations, and most recently, HSBC. At HSBC, Jamshed has led a variety of IT operations and change delivery responsibilities. He has led the GSS operations in India, and he was responsible for setting up the IT transformation unit for global banking and markets in HSBC China. Currently, he leads wholesale technology operations for India, and in this role, he's responsible for developing technology roadmaps, innovation pathways, and execution plans for various HSBC regions, covering all relevant global business, global functional activities in these regions. Jamshed, welcome once again, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to interact with you today.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to the next few minutes that we have to spend with each other.
Wonderful. Now coming to our theme, innovation and agility in the age of Web 3.0. A lot has happened in this space. Ever since the first paper by Satoshi Nakamoto came out in 2009, it created a revolution in the space of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, virtual digital assets. From that point in time, we have moved really fast in terms of a lot of startups coming up in this space and a lot of enterprise activity happening in the space of Web3. But it continues to be an enigma. Jamshed, my first question to you would be, can you help us understand what is Web3? How is it different from the previous versions? What is this technology really about?
Namita, I think that's a really profound question. And for us to be able to get a better appreciation for what Web 3 or Web 3.0 is, I think we need to understand the genesis of the internet and how, to an extent, we've consumed and interacted with the internet as well. So the very first, I'd say, generation, and what we perhaps fondly refer to as maybe Web 1.0, was a point in time where we were typically consumers of information. A lot of people refer to it as the read-only period during our interaction with Web 1.0 because information was portrayed on screens, it had hyperlinks, we clicked on it, it took us to another page. It almost felt like it was just one large Wikipedia. And that duration lasted from approximately 1991 till about 2004. And I think the real period of change and the way that we interact with the internet at this point in time is what we refer to as Web 2.0. And in Web 2.0, there are definitely further interactivity that we've created. And typically, for us to be able to, as common users of Web 2.0, we don't really need to know development languages or coding languages, but we can still host and post content. And to an extent, that period, the interactions have progressed from read-only to read and write. This is really important. The other advent of Web 2.0 is we've gone from being where it's just been an information economy to a product and a platform economy. And what I mean by that is if you look at the monetization capabilities within Web 2.0, it's usually by very large platforms, whether you Facebooks of the world or the Googles of the world, where essentially what happens is your preferences, what you search on the internet, the way that you interact, what you consume is registered in very large scale databases. And obviously then those databases are utilized by other organizations. And the commercialization of it translates then into very structured advertisements, into very targeted advertising. And hence, typically what happens is the monetization capability is really limited to a handful of very large organizations. Web 3.0, and it's interesting because the person who gave it its name, Gavin Wood, is also the co-sponsor in terms of Ethereum. So you'll see a lot of linkages between Web 3.0, the technology that's being used, the concepts of smart contracts and tokenization, then delivering a slightly different experience to what we see in 2.0, right? And the key tenets which are different in Web 3.0 is obviously one of decentralization, because what starts to happen is decentralization takes place through the advent of technologies such as blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. The second key tenet within Web 3.0 is obviously the ability for it to be trustful and permissionless, which essentially means that you don't really need to, as an example, accept cookies when you consume information from the internet. The third tenet within Web 3.0, which is also going to have a profound impact, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. That, to an extent, is going to change a lot in terms of how we interact with the internet, how we consume the internet, and obviously the options which are provided to us. And the fourth tenet within Web 3.0 is its ability to be accessible through a number of devices from anywhere, and we kind of refer to this very fondly as the Internet of Things. So through that particular transition, essentially what started to happen is, like I said before, we've gone from an information economy to a product and a platform economy to now a token-based economy. And I think that difference is really key for our audience to understand.
Fantastic, Jamshed. That was a brilliant 101 for all our listeners into what Web3 is and how is it different. And you kind of rightly mentioned we are moving from the platform and product economy to the token economy to a point where I believe both of them will coexist, and there will literally be a use case-based utilization of a Web2 and a Web3. Also interesting was what you mentioned about how Web3 kind of takes care of multiple technologies. There is blockchain, there is AI, there is the aspect of making it decentralized, distributed, very large scale. It's almost like telling every digital citizen, that they can own, they can create, and they can literally direct the way they would want their content to be used. How does Web3 as a concept then apply to a BFSI sector? Or if I may specifically say to the kind of work that you do at HSBC in terms of wholesale technology, what are some of the things you have seen in Web3 that are very, very useful for your area?
Sure. With the advent of Web 3.0, what we definitely see is advancements in the technology space of decentralized finance, which again is a wonderful use case in terms of Web 3.0. And if you start with some of the basics, and we're already experiencing these things in terms of a normal person's ability to consume this, we see this very often in the space of cryptocurrency. But let's just understand, behind cryptocurrency, obviously, there are a number of ideas, not necessarily just the products that we've encountered through, as an example, Bitcoin or Ethereum, but there are just a number of concepts and ideas that we're constantly consuming, even now. And one of the most interesting of these concepts is obviously smart contracts. And what smart contracts really are is an ability for two parties to be able to agree particular conditions under which a contract would be executed. And essentially what that rides upon is the fact that advancements in blockchain technology have facilitated that. Now, if you go to the next step, what you will see is the concept of fungible as well as non-fungible tokens, which again is very interesting. And I know that a lot of us are already starting to experiment with it in our own personal space. And essentially that allows advancements in technologies around payment gateways, marketplace APIs, digital wallets as a really good case as well. And that's typically the period that we're in now, and we're starting to see a lot of maturity taking place in this particular space. But as we move forward, what's going to be really interesting is essentially how those concepts start to then, from a financial industry space, move forward into the space of clearing and custody. And you start having technologies and ideas around digital vaults. You start thinking about blockchain exchanges. And I think that can be hugely powerful. We've only started to scratch the surface of typically how organizations and consumers will interact in that particular space. And then as you fast forward, you start looking at things like brokerage exchanges, trade matching engines, trading services. There could be advancements with regards to pricing as well as risk models that start to kind of take shape as well. And then essentially, as it continues to mature even further, and we're talking about an aspirational state where you can even start to look at things such as digital asset lending. And then organizations that have been in the conventional space will start looking at collateral and lending and liquidity management in the digital economy, right? So a lot to look forward to, a lot of excitement in this particular space. And as with the advent of any new technology, we will have experiments. Some of these experiments will be hugely successful, and some of them perhaps not so much. But we will be learning from them, and then we'll continue to evolve.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a fantastic perspective on how Web3 could enable a real transformation in the financial world when it comes to improving efficiencies. I'm sure there will be a lot to look forward to when it comes to transparency, execution speed, etc. But when you think about the broader perspective of Web3, Jamshed, you mentioned certain very, very important tenets about it: decentralization, permissionlessness, distributed architecture, and probably also the ability to have people on the digital space with digital identities that are verifiable, right? When we look at all of these aspects, where do you think these if I may say, use cases are today? How far are we when it comes to being very, very decentralized? What kind of experiments do you think have we done when it comes to permissionlessness or digital identities? What do you think is our current achievement thus far?
So I think we've progressed really well. Many organizations now are actually in the space where they're looking at doing KYC for digital identities. And essentially what that means is the number of times a regular consumer in the financial space or otherwise would have to kind of certify or validate their credentials and their identity through large amounts of form filling and paperwork. We can, to an extent, expedite all of that. We can bypass all of that by making sure that we capitalize on the fact that now we have very stringent, governed processes around managing digital identities. And that, to an extent, I think is a big win for many organizations, because of the amount of effort and time that's consumed in doing all of these kind of validation processes. Now, this is not only just going to be useful for organizations in the commercial space, but obviously in the regulatory space as well, and in the context of governments, making sure that they have an ability to be able to manage this data. One of the concerns, obviously, in the current generation of the internet is the security of an individual's data. And that's where I think Web 3.0 kind of steps up and will take the space of making sure that an individual's data is better protected, better governed, and more importantly, owned by the individual themselves. And I think that, to an extent, is a huge step forward. Now, if we kind of explore where experiments have already started to take place, I think a lot of us have actually heard of the metaverse. And the metaverse is a really good example where you have a digital identity through the creation of avatars. There are products in the fungible token space as well as in the non-fungible token space. There is an ability for individuals in the metaverse to be able to have exchanges. And that becomes hugely powerful as well in terms of a digital commerce environment or an ecosystem. And that, to an extent, is already reality today, and obviously will continue to get refined as we move further along. But it doesn't just stop there. I think things that we currently utilize even today, and perhaps maybe the one that we would use most frequently is YouTube as an example, right? In the construct of Web 3.0, Odyssey is a platform that already exists. It's using Web 3.0 technologies, and it allows content creators to have better control, typically, over what they produce and how other people will consume it. Brain Trust is another organization already leveraging the technologies that are currently available through Web 3.0 in terms of talent sourcing and the ability for it's run by them, it's managed by them, it's for people who want to be in the space where either you're looking for talent or you're sourcing talent. And I think that's hugely powerful as well. Helium is an example of another organization which is using Web 3.0, using blockchain technology for Wi-Fi when it comes to the Internet of Things, when it comes to the IoT space. Again, a very strong use case. I think we're going to experience Web 3.0 in a number of flavors, whether it be in the entertainment industry, like we spoke about when it comes to YouTube and Odyssey, or in the metaverse, or just through virtualization. But we'll see it expand into the realms of healthcare and data privacy in the construct of the healthcare industry. We spoke a little bit about it in the construct of decentralized finance. And I think that can be hugely powerful as well. And I think as we continue to experiment with it, there will be a confluence. And I think that's what you alluded to as well in the question. There will be a confluence of a number of things that we use today as part of Web 2.0 with the newer emerging technology space in Web 3.0.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic perspective. You helped us understand how the various tenets of this particular technology will interact not just with the sectors, but all the other technologies. And that makes it very, very enigmatic. It kind of also puts a lot of impetus on the technology developers, the solution builders, the people who are designing the architecture for Web3 to really think hard and bring out the innovative aspects, things that you mentioned, and I want to understand your perspectives there. One, security and privacy, definitely very important. There's a big conversation of how secure is blockchain, which is supposed to be a lot secure, and what do we really need to do in terms of having the right policies in place, but also the right kind of design elements for the Web3 solutions that are to come. The second that I would like to for you to comment on is, how do we take this technology a little bit beyond, the enterprise, the corporate use, to make it very, very useful for a broader social purpose? And when I say that, there's always a connotation. Whenever we talk about technology today, there's a connotation towards how does it impact ESG? So would love to understand your perspectives there as well. But I'll come to the first one first, which is security and privacy. Your perspectives on that.
The technology is going to continue to evolve, and the underlying protocols that help drive these technologies will continue to be formulated by developers, engineers, to a point where it gives us the flexibility that's required. It also maintains the security, which is going to be integral when it comes to the evolution of Web 3.0 and beyond. However, the way that we govern this, I think, is going to slightly change in its construct. And essentially, what will start to happen is we'll start to see the advent and maturing of decentralized autonomous organizations, and we refer to them as DAOs. And I think the DAOs will have more ability to be able to influence how this continues to evolve. And that becomes hugely important because the voice of the consumers need to be heard and integral to the development of both the product space as well as the technology space, and the kind of and start to address the ethical concerns, obviously, that are involved when it comes to advancement in terms of these technologies. And that's really why it's important for us to be able to understand that democratization of these technologies is really important, and the ability for us as consumers to be able to start to influence how this is governed and how this will move forward. I think that becomes really key and integral. Essentially, when we start to look at the ethical side of this, there are obviously constructs and concepts that we still need to improve on. Data security is going to be one of them. Decentralization, and how secure is the current decentralization as part of the protocols that we operate against today. How we safeguard an individual's right to be able to host or promote content onto the internet, but then based on their discretion, also to be able to remove it, which is, again, one of perhaps the drawbacks in the current Web 2.0. As you can imagine, you put a picture onto the internet today, or you put a video onto the internet today, it's very difficult to be able to remove that from the internet. And with the advent of Web 3.0 and advancements that take place in this space, one would hope that we have that kind of flexibility, where obviously one of those kind of ethical concerns that we have today in terms of ownership is also addressed. Yeah. I think one of the other ethical concerns, and this is perhaps kind of moving into the space of your second question, is also the ESG related elements of this. The technology, when it's very early days, was very electricity and power intensive. I think there was some research done, and they looked at just Bitcoin at a point in time, and the amount of power that was consumed in terms of making sure that the Bitcoin environment continue to exist and could continue to, and people continue to transact against it. And there was a comparison that was made that said it probably consumed as much electricity as the entire country of Thailand. So I think that becomes interesting, and obviously if we were to continue to scale it in that manner, it would be very detrimental to the ecology. And this is where the advent of technology, I think, makes it more sustainable. So you start to move away from proof of work to proof of stake, and just the very nature of changing that to an extent has made it almost 99% more efficient in terms of electricity consumption. I think this is just, again, the beginning. We will continue to see the technology evolve and obviously become far more responsible in terms of how it uses the limited resources that we have today.
Absolutely, makes a lot of sense, Jamshed. Those were brilliant points. And if I may summarize our discussion today, we started off with understanding what is Web3 and the kind of revolution that this particular technology literally can bring about in the way we interact with the digital space, our digital existence, the digital trust that we can build, the way efficiencies can come into play. The way other technologies can come together with blockchain as a foundation to bring about this revolution, and how various sectors, more importantly, how the BFSI sector and more the financial operations sector, which is at the pivot of this, can really unleash the power of Web3, but also the fact that we need to be a lot more responsible in the use of this technology. At every step, we have to think through the design elements of it, be very responsible and socially responsible, in fact, in terms of how this technology can be made a lot energy efficient, a lot more socially, uplifting and game changing. So wonderful getting your thoughts on this. You've been at the forefront of it. Look forward to more from you. And thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a pleasure, Namita. Thank you very much.